Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss one aspect of our UK-EU agreement which doesn't seem to be featuring in reports, but should be because it will actually make our food safer. And no, not because it protects us against the unsafe food from America that Trump's pet monkey, Peter Navarro, wanted to foist upon us. We could always have denied that. But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So an article earlier this week highlighted the case of a Brexit food control post in Portsmouth, built at great expense in order to carry out Brexit checks on EU imports. Because we have agreed a deal with the EU to do away with those checks, the facility will no longer be needed. £25 million of taxpayer money down the drain unless they can recoup some of the costs by turning it into something else. And this is just one of 100 facilities around the country built to deal specifically with the extra Brexit red tape. Mind you, the total cost of Brexit when added together is eye-watering. But this facility also helps to explain how one consequence of the EU deal, which is not being reported on, is going to make our food safer. In the article, Portsmouth's port director, Mike Sellers, explained that the very high-tech facility was designed to carry out 80 checks a day. However, despite the Conservatives finally implementing standards checks last year after years of delays, it was only carrying out 3 a day. So why was that? Because the Conservative government, after trying to implement a standard regime for years and failing, eventually just implemented a very weak one which targeted only the very highest risk goods. The consequence of not having robust standards checks in place was that smugglers had a very easy time getting illegal produce into the country. While the media were pointing at refugees coming across on boats, the real threat to our safety was trundling along in the back of a lorry. And we know this was happening on a horrifying scale. I've referred to this example before, but it can't be used enough. Back in 2022, nearly 2 years after leaving the single market, but when we were still not carrying out any standards checks, the authorities decided to run an experiment to see what the consequences of this were. Because there were some saying at the time, oh, it's probably fine. So they checked. They checked 22 vehicles over a 24-hour period. 21 of the 22 vehicles had illegal food products in it. Rotting meat, dairy products stored with raw meat without anything preventing contamination of meat juices onto, say, cream cakes. Meats just stored in plastic bags, not like as literally carrier bags, not properly sealed or with labelling. Absolute horror show. 21 out of 22 checked vehicles contained illegally unsafe to eat food. Criminals were having a whale of a time pushing their unfit food onto Britain, a country not only stupid enough to leave the single market, but to leave the single market without a plan in place to make sure it could manage its trade border standards afterwards. And remember, this was just a 24-hour period to see what happened. There were no checks the next day, or the next week, or the next month. It was a one-off. On every other day, those 21 lorries were getting through, no problem at all. That was the scale of the problem. We needed checks to stop this happening, and we needed them urgently. We never got them. What the Tories under Sunak eventually implemented after Boris Johnson failed to do anything at all was little more effective than putting a sign on your broken front door saying, "Don't try to burgle this house. The door is totally locked, honest, best lock ever." A facility in Portsmouth designed to cope with 80 checks a day and with no indication that this would have been enough for a robust defence was only carrying out 3 a day once the standards regime was implemented. Absolute joke. So why were so few checks taking place? Because checks take time, and time means you are slowing down the flow of freight. If you can do it efficiently, it's worth it to protect your market from illegal goods. But we couldn't. We didn't have the room, we didn't have the staff. So we just opted for checks on the highest risk products and hoped for the best. But the thing about smugglers is they're not the most honest of people. See, what's in the box does not match what's on the paperwork. That is basically the definition of smuggling. And the paperwork is not going to be designed to invite checks. If the smugglers know that certain food products are not going to be checked, that's what they will put on the paperwork, regardless of what's in the crate. It was an insane scheme designed to give the impression we were protecting our borders, when in reality we were just waving everything through. But now we've done a deal to do away with the checks, we can move to a safer regime. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking. Hang on a minute, Phil. I'll spot a small flaw here. How does going from 3 checks a day, which I agree is pathetic, to no checks a day protect us from smugglers? And how were we protected when there were no checks a day while we were in the single market? Good question. The answer is because checks were taking place and will again. But those checks are not at the border. We haven't got the facilities to do it at the border. It's inefficient. They will happen through inspections of production facilities, warehouses, and so on. The problem with Brexit is that Britain was no longer part of the EU. EU inspectors inspect to EU standards. They don't inspect British standards. It's not their job. So if any goods from the EU are going to Britain, that has nothing to do with inspectors in the EU. As long as it's not intended for sale in their market, it's got nothing to do with them. It's up to British officials to inspect goods coming into Britain. But we didn't have enough of them. And that's sovereignty, by the way. Raw meat juices in your cream cakes is what people voted for. But if we have the same standards, then inspectors on both the EU and the British side are doing the same job in the same way. So we can go back to having inspections at source, spread out, not trying to load them all up on a tiny part of the southern end of an island, on both sides of the trade border, with each side confident that the other is maintaining those standards, and avoid all the very expensive checks which hamper trade and allow criminals to sell us dangerous food. This deal goes beyond just the boost to trade, which is welcome enough. It should also lead to our market becoming safer as well. But the media don't seem to care about that. Or maybe they just want to avoid highlighting how dangerous the situation had become since Brexit. But this is futile. The country is becoming more and more pro-EU, with every single young person coming of voting age and each Brexit voter popping their clogs. One day, perhaps the media will report on what Brexit really was. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.